there, my name is Rivera, and for today's lesson, we are going to talk about ionic bonding. So, what is exactly ionic bonds mean? So, ionic bonds is a type of chemical bonds that acts like glue that holds the atoms together, mainly transfer metal and non-metal atoms. It involves the electrostatic attraction between oppositely charged ions or between two atoms with sharply different electronegativities. For example, we have sodium chloride, where the sodium is the metal element and the chlorine is a non-metal element. Furthermore, in the lesson, we're going to elaborate how these two elements attract to each other. But for now, let's talk more about ionic bonding. So, what exactly is ionic bonding? Ionic bonding is a form of chemical connection in which one atom loses one or more valence electrons from its valence shell and transfer them to another atom. To further elaborate this lesson, we are moving on to our station to show you the example of ionic bonding and how exactly ionic bonding happens. Here we see the elements that used to create sodium chloride, also known as salt. Here we have sodium, which contains 11 electrons and a metal element. On the other hand, we have chlorine, which consists of 17 electrons and a non-metal element. Here we have the elements for the sodium chloride. For sodium, this only contains 11 electrons, while chlorine contains 17 electrons. Both of them are not balanced. So let me demonstrate to you how we can balance them. Here we see that the sodium element only have 11 electrons, and for chlorine it has 17. As I said, atoms only have one goal, and that is to balance their elements. Now, to balance this, a bonds need to be formed. To balance each elements, they need to obtain 8 electrons on their valence shell. For this to be balanced, sodium must transfer one of its electrons to chlorine. After transferring one of the electrons from sodium to chlorine, we now achieve the balance rule, which is the octet rule. And if we paid attention, because sodium loses one of its electrons, it is now a positively charged, and because chlorine gained one electron, it is now a negatively charged. And when both negatively charged atom and positively charged atom met, they will attract to each other, thus creating sodium chloride. For our next example of ionic bonding, we have magnesium oxide. Here are the elements they are used to create this. Here we have magnesium, which consists 12 electrons and a metal element. On the other hand, we have oxygen, which consists of 8 electrons and considered a non-metal element. As you can see here, these elements consist 12 electrons, while oxygen consists 8 electrons. But both of them are not balanced. Let me show you how we can balance them using ionic bonding. As we transfer 2 electrons from magnesium, it becomes positively charged 2, while oxygen gains 2 electrons, thus becoming negatively charged 2, and both attract each other, thus creating magnesium oxide. For added information, chlorine become chloride because it have -1 charge, and oxygen become oxide because it have -2 charge. And that's all for today's lesson. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.